The Supreme Court just sent a massive 6-3 warning shot to every anti-gun state in America, and this ruling changes the rules of the game for you right now. This just dropped, and it proves that the highest court in the land is finally losing its patience with states that treat your Second Amendment rights like a second-class privilege. This could hit you next, because if you live in a state that is constantly passing new restrictions, the ground beneath your feet just shifted in a way that nobody is talking about yet. This is not some distant legal theory that only matters to lawyers in black robes or people arguing on the news. This is about your ability to carry a firearm to protect your family without being treated like a criminal by your own government. If you have ever worried about crossing an invisible line into a gun-free zone or being arrested for a technicality, this case is the shield you have been waiting for. The Supreme Court just signaled that the era of states ignoring the Constitution is coming to a very messy and very loud end. A lot of people think they know what is happening in the courts, but they are getting the headline completely wrong because the real story is hidden in the fine print. Most people think a single court case only affects one person, but this warning is a roadmap for how every gun law in your state is about to be challenged and potentially struck down. We are talking about the ripple effects of cases like United States versus Rahimi and the ongoing fallout from the landmark Bruin decision from 2022. The court is making it clear that they are watching every move these states make, and they are not amused by the legal games being played to bypass your rights. We are going to look at exactly what the justices said, why the media is ignoring the most dangerous parts of this warning, and how this affects your safety today. You need to understand this now because the legal landscape is moving faster than ever, and being caught on the wrong side of a fast-moving law is a mistake you cannot afford to make. If you are the kind of person who refuses to stay uninformed while your rights are on the line, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. We track these fast-moving legal changes every single day so you can stay ahead of the curve and protect what matters most. Being part of this community means you get the truth without the political spin, and you get the clarity you need to navigate a world that is becoming increasingly hostile to gun owners. Now we have to look at what actually happened in the courtroom because the details are where the real power lives. For years, states like New York, California, and Illinois have been trying to find every possible loophole to stop people from exercising their right to carry. After the Supreme Court said they had to issue permits in the Bruin case, these states didn't just give up and follow the law. Instead, they passed massive new bills that declared almost every square inch of the state a sensitive place where carrying is still a crime. They thought they could just rename the whole state a gun-free zone, and the Supreme Court wouldn't notice or wouldn't care to intervene again. But the justices just sent a clear signal that this kind of defiance is not going to fly anymore, and they are ready to step in again. When the court issues a warning like this, it is like a coach blowing a whistle in the middle of a game to tell the players the next penalty will result in an immediate ejection. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a roommate who refuses to do the dishes, even though the house rules say it is his turn. You tell him he has to do them, so he picks up one plate, washes it, and then breaks the rest of the dishes just to be spiteful. That is exactly what these states are doing with your Second Amendment rights, and the Supreme Court is the landlord who just walked in and saw the mess. They are making it clear that the rules are not suggestions, and the consequences for breaking them are going to be severe. The court is using a very specific set of tools to send this message, and one of those tools is something called the Bruin test. In plain English, this means that if a state wants to pass a gun law, they have to prove that there is a historical tradition of that exact kind of law from the time the Constitution was written. If they can't find a similar law from the 1700s or 1800s, the new law is unconstitutional and it has to go. Most states are failing this test miserably, and they are starting to panic because their entire legal strategy is falling apart. This is a massive deal because it takes the power out of the hands of politicians who hate guns and puts it back into the hands of the Constitution. For decades, judges used something called interest balancing, which was just a fancy way of saying the government's goals were more important than your rights. The Supreme Court has officially killed that idea, and they are now telling lower courts that they cannot just side with the government because they think a law is a good idea. What do you think about states trying to bypass the Supreme Court by creating these massive gun-free zones in every park and parking lot? Do you think the justices are moving fast enough to stop them, or is the damage already being done to ordinary citizens? Let me know in the comments below, and hit that like button if you think it is time for the court to finally put an end to these unconstitutional games once and for all. Your feedback helps us show the world that people are actually paying attention to these major legal shifts. Here is what this means for you in your daily life, and this is where it gets very personal for every gun owner. If you live in a state that is currently fighting the Supreme Court, you are living in a legal gray area that is incredibly dangerous. One day a law is blocked by a judge, and the next day it is put back into effect by an appeals court, leaving you wondering if the gun in your holster is going to land you in a jail cell. This warning from the Supreme Court is the beginning of the end for that confusion, but the transition is going to be rough. Let's talk about how this affects 3 different types of people who are trying to do the right thing every day. First, think about the parent who carries a firearm to protect their children while they are out at a public park or a shopping mall. In many states, those places have been declared off-limits, which means that parent has to choose between their safety and staying within the law. This ruling is the first step toward making sure those parents never have to make that impossible choice ever again. Next, consider the person who is a first-time gun owner and is just trying to navigate the complex web of local regulations. They might see a sign on a door and not know if it carries the weight of law, or if it is just a suggestion from a business owner. The confusion caused by these defiant states is designed to keep people from carrying at all, but the Supreme Court is saying that the government cannot use confusion as a weapon against your rights. Finally, think about the person who keeps a firearm at home for self-defense, but has to travel through restrictive areas to get to a range or a hunting spot. If you are stopped by police in a state that is ignoring the Supreme Court, you might find yourself in the middle of a legal battle that costs you thousands of dollars even if you did nothing wrong. The court is trying to stop these states from creating those traps for law-abiding citizens who are just trying to live their lives. Imagine you are driving and the speed limit signs are being changed by the minute by people who don't want you on the road at all. One sign says 50, the next says 10, and the one after that is blank, but there is a cop waiting around the corner to give you a ticket anyway. That is the reality of gun laws in many states right now, and the Supreme Court is finally stepping in to tell the state they have to put up permanent, clear, and constitutional signs that don't change every time a politician gets angry. The part most people are missing is that this warning isn't just about carry permits. It is about the entire concept of sensitive places. The court is signaling that you cannot just call a whole city a sensitive place because you feel like it. They are defining exactly what that word means. And it is a very narrow list that includes places like courtrooms and polling stations, not every sidewalk and restaurant in the country. This is a massive shift that will eventually force states to tear down those gun-free zone signs in almost every public area. This is where it gets even more serious because the court is also looking at how states are using background check systems and waiting periods to delay your rights. Some states have turned a background check that should take minutes into a process that takes weeks or even months. The Supreme Court's warning suggests that any delay that isn't absolutely necessary is a violation of your rights, and they are preparing to strike those delays down as well. The bigger issue here is that the Supreme Court is finally realizing that if they don't act aggressively, the states will never stop. This is a fight for the very soul of the Second Amendment, and the justices are making it clear that they are the final word on what the Constitution means. They are tired of being ignored, and when a Supreme Court justice gets tired of being ignored, they start writing opinions that strip the government of its power to regulate you into submission. The part that should worry you is that while the Supreme Court is winning the long-term war, the states are still winning the short-term battles by keeping these laws on the books as long as possible. They know that every day a law stays in effect is a day they have successfully restricted your freedom, even if they eventually lose in court. This is why you cannot afford to let your guard down just because the Supreme Court issued a warning today. There is a hidden consequence to all of this that most people are completely missing, and we are going to dive into that right now. When the Supreme Court issues a warning like this, it doesn't just affect gun laws. It affects how police interact with you on the street. If a law is on shaky legal ground, many police departments will stop enforcing it because they don't want to be sued for violating your civil rights. This means the landscape of enforcement is changing just as fast as the laws themselves. This is where the next big fight starts, and it is going to be in the lower courts where judges have to decide whether to follow the Supreme Court or help their state governments. You need to be subscribed to this channel to see how those lower court battles play out, because that is where the real-world impact happens first. Staying ahead of these changes is the only way to make sure you are always on the right side of the law while still exercising your full range of rights. Let's look at a few real-life scenarios to see how this warning actually changes the stakes for you. Imagine you are in a traffic stop and you have a concealed carry permit from a state that the local police don't want to recognize. In the old days, you might have been arrested on the spot and forced to fight it out in court for years. Now, with the Supreme Court's warning hanging over the heads of every officer and prosecutor, there is a much higher chance they will think twice before violating a right the court has clearly defended. Think about a scenario where you are traveling across a state line and you enter a state with a high-capacity magazine ban. Many of these bans are currently being challenged under the same Bruin test that the Supreme Court just reinforced. If you are caught with a standard magazine in one of those states, your lawyer can now point to this Supreme Court warning as a reason why your charges should be dropped immediately. It gives you a level of legal leverage that didn't exist just a few years ago. What about a situation where you are trying to buy a firearm and the state keeps putting you on an indefinite delay for no reason? With the court signaling that these delays are unconstitutional, gun shops and advocacy groups are filing lawsuits that are winning faster than ever. You might find that the red tape you used to deal with starts to disappear because the state is afraid of being held in contempt by a federal judge. It is a slow process, but the momentum is finally on the side of the gun owner. We need to talk about the future consequences because this warning is just the tip of the iceberg for what is coming in 2025 and 2026. The Supreme Court is currently looking at cases involving the ban on common semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15 and the ban on standard capacity magazines. If they apply the same logic they used in this warning, those bans are all going to fall like a house of cards across the entire country. We are looking at a total reset of American gun laws. State governments are already trying to come up with new ways to fight back, including using insurance requirements or high taxes to make gun ownership too expensive for the average person. But the Supreme Court has already anticipated these moves, and they have hinted that any financial barrier to a constitutional right is just as illegal as a direct ban. They are closing the exits one by one until the states have no choice but to follow the Second Amendment as it was intended. This is where the next fight starts, and it is going to be incredibly messy as states try to defy the court until the very last second. You might see some governors calling for constitutional amendments or trying to pack the courts to stop this progress. But for now, the momentum is firmly with the people, and the highest court in the land is standing in the way of those who want to disarm you. It is a time for cautious optimism, but you have to stay sharp and ready for anything. Now let's bust some of the biggest myths that are being spread online about this Supreme Court warning. Myth number one is that this ruling instantly makes every gun law in your state illegal. That is not how it works. A warning from the court is a sign of what is coming, but until a specific law is struck down in a final ruling, you can still be arrested for breaking it. Don't go out and break a law today just because you think the Supreme Court will eventually kill it. Myth number two is that the Supreme Court is only doing this for political reasons. The truth is much simpler. The court is finally following the actual text and history of the Constitution after decades of ignoring it. This isn't about helping one political party. It is about restoring the balance of power between the citizen and the state. When the court follows the law, it looks like a win for freedom because the Constitution is designed to protect your freedom from the government. Myth number three is that this only matters in red states or blue states. This warning applies to the entire country, and it affects federal laws just as much as state laws. It means that the ATF and other federal agencies also have to follow the same historical test when they try to ban things like pistol braces or frames and receivers. This is a nationwide reset that levels the playing field for every single American, regardless of where they live or who they vote for. The emotional reality of this is that for the first time in a generation, gun owners don't have to feel like they are on the losing side of history. For years, the trend was always toward more control, more restrictions, and more fear. Now the trend has reversed, and the highest authority in the land is telling you that your rights are not up for debate. That sense of relief and dignity is what this legal battle is really about for the millions of people who just want to be left alone. Think about the dignity of being able to protect your home without feeling like a criminal. Think about the peace of mind that comes from knowing the law is on your side when you are doing the right thing. That is why we follow these cases so closely, because the law is the only thing standing between your freedom and someone else's agenda. When the Supreme Court stands up for you, it is a reminder that you are a citizen with rights, not a subject with permissions. This is a story about a government that forgot who it works for and a court that is finally reminding them. It is a story about ordinary people who refused to give up their rights even when it was difficult and expensive to fight for them. Every time a state passes an illegal law and someone challenges it in court, they are carrying the torch for all of us. This warning from the Supreme Court is the fire that is starting to burn through the layers of unconstitutional regulations that have piled up over the years. To recap the three most important things you need to take away from this. First, the Supreme Court is officially losing its patience with states that ignore the Second Amendment. Second, the Bruin test is the new standard that is going to strike down almost every modern gun restriction in the country. And third, while the long-term outlook is great, you still have to be extremely careful in the short term because states are still trying to trap you with confusing and fast-changing laws. This matters long-term because it ensures that your children and grandchildren will have the same rights that the Founding Fathers intended for all of us. It keeps the power where it belongs with the individual. This is about more than just guns. It is about whether the government has to follow the rules of the Constitution. If they can ignore the Second Amendment, they can ignore the First, the Fourth, and every other right you hold dear. This is the line in the sand. You are the reason this fight is being won, because by staying informed and staying lawful, you are proving that gun owners are the most responsible and civic-minded people in the country. We are not going to let the noise and the propaganda drown out the truth of what is happening in our courts. We are going to keep watching, keep learning, and keep standing up for the rights that make this country what it is. You are part of something much bigger than a single court case. If you want to stay on the front lines of this legal revolution and get updates the moment they happen, make sure you are subscribed to the channel with notifications on. We are building a community of people who value the truth and their constitutional rights above all else. What is the one gun law in your state that you want to see the Supreme Court strike down next? Leave a comment below and let's talk about it. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember that your rights are worth the fight.